Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Stevens, and this is the Psychology to Live By podcast. Why do we avoid and so dislike difficult conversations? I think we fear that the other person's not to be trusted, but their trustworthiness is not always independent of our state. And with knowledge and skills, we can have some say in it. We don't have complete control, but we can exert some influence. If we're cognizant of what's happening and we have the ability to shift or influence the interpersonal dynamics, we're much less likely to avoid difficult conversations because we would be more confident that we'll handle it well. We'd be more likely to remain objective, curious, proactive, and even experimental. So once we've managed our own emotions and we have some confidence in our ability to handle the conversation well, we can then become aware of what kind of states the other person's experiencing, what their needs are, and we can skillfully address those needs in the present moment. Now, in the first two talks in this series, we saw that our task was to reframe, refocus, and redirect the conversation for ourselves. Now, our task is also to help the other person do the same three things. Can we invite them to positively reframe the purpose of the conversation, to shift their attention to more useful and more helpful objects of conversation? And can we encourage them to engage in a way that is consistent with that wiser purpose? So I think to start, we should become aware of the legitimate, fundamental human needs the other person is trying to address. For our purposes, these needs to protect self, to connect with others, and to feel a sense of belonging are what typically underlie difficult conversations. So, we ought to address the person's needs and hopefully successfully invite them into higher level states, such as feeling strong or feeling that they're partnering with us. So the first need a person might have would be the resistant person's need to self-protect. Now, if this is the case, you should explicitly create a safe space for them. You should speak with transparency. This quietens their amygdala-based alarm system by reassuring them they needn't feel threatened or hypervigilant. So open, candid, and caring conversations send messages of trust. For the skeptical person, the key uncertainty is about whether to connect with you or not. They're not sure that it's safe to do so. So you should extend an olive branch, even with people you see as foes. Be proactive in connecting with them and openly engage in building relationships. Show you trust them and send messages of friendship that will shift the energy towards appreciation. Now, very often people are ambivalent. They are waiting to see if they should trust you. So their need to belong means they're uncertain and are looking for signs you can be trusted. So the task here is to demonstrate an interest in their needs and aspirations, and thereby create a safe space for people to feel that they belong. In doing this, we're inviting them into our inner circle. We reframe uncomfortable conversations as opportunities to get to know what's on each other's minds, and this then moves us towards understanding and trusting each other. Now, I'd like to talk about a few general strategies for conversational intelligence. And we always start by building rapport. It actually takes time to get to know each other, and it requires us to set a positive tone. It also takes time for the other person's physiology to relax and change state. So we give time for both of us to feel each other out. By a long margin, the most important skill is not talking, but listening. And if our intention is clear that we really want to connect, that intention will inform our body language and positively impact the other person's body. They will feel it as positive and welcoming because both people's neuroendocrine systems will release oxytocin, which is, of course, the bonding hormone. And when we ask questions, we should ask questions for which we have no answers. In other words, our desire to understand them is genuine. So we don't try to guide or position them with leading questions, which typically only serve to increase their distrust. No, we are genuinely curious and want to learn and discover. This creates collaboration and openness in both parties. Now, an excellent way to put all these strategies into action is to use the OARS technique. The O stands for open questions, the A for affirmations, the R for reflections, and the S for summaries. Now, it's mostly a deep listening approach where we ask open questions with an authentic desire to learn and understand. And whatever they say, we affirm the other person's experiences, feelings, opinions, while not having to agree with them. We then provide plenty of confirmatory reflections, paraphrases and summaries of our understanding so we can explicitly get on the same page. And when we do this well, we can then use conversational agility to problem solve and shift the conversation to a more collaborative venture. With deep rapport established, you can pivot the conversation to reframe and refocus and redirect with them collaboratively. Typical phrases in doing this might be, let me reframe that another way, or let's focus our discussion here, or let's try to get to this outcome together. And finally, as we saw in the second talk, there are 3 types of difficult conversations, and there are specific ways to deal with each of them that we'll now examine in turn. For the what happened conversation, we want to shift the implicit purpose from figuring out who's right and who's wrong to a learning conversation. So, questions and statements such as, we're seeing this so differently, I wonder why. Or, I'd really like to understand how you see it. These will help redirect the conversation to a mutually respectful inquiry. For the second type, for difficult conversations that have evoked intense feelings, we need to demonstrate empathy and care. So, statements like, I'm sorry this is so difficult, and clearly there are very important issues here. And something like, let's take it easy with each other. All these will help validate the person's feelings and encourage a learning conversation to figure out what these feelings are all about. And finally, where the person's identity feels threatened, we can help them recognize that identity is not simple, it's complex. It's not black and white, and we can use the conversation to build a more robust and more nuanced sense of self. So, statements like, there's lots of layers to this, isn't there? And let's take it slow and respectfully. Or, I think there are important things to unpack for both of us here. All of these will help the person feel respected and valued. So, in conclusion, mastering difficult conversations involves a range of knowledge and skills. We need to be able to step back to rise above the conversation and analyse what the dynamics are, seeing what implicit needs are being expressed and then actively taking care of those needs. Most importantly, we need to shift the style of conversation to one that's more helpful and more constructive. Usually this involves lifting the level of trust and thereby the level of collaboration. And when we can do this, both parties become more intelligent and more creative. You've been listening to the Psychology to Live By podcast. If you'd like to know more, my website is www.drchris.life. And if you like the podcast, share it with people you like so they can like it too.